Now News Extra on KNEB and brought to you by Gehring Civic Center. Here's Kevin Mooney.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. Very pleased to have Senator John Harms with us today on our show as we preview the upcoming legislative session. A lot of things to talk about, so we'll get right to it. First of all, I guess the big thing everybody's talking about is taxes, and the Tax Modernization Committee that you were a part of kind of said we needed to study this a little more. The governor says property tax relief, says all this other stuff. What do you think is really going to happen?
Well, I think it's going to be a really interesting issue, and I think that the committee's concerns at that time, Kevin, were simply that whenever you make a change on the revenue side, it has an impact on the expenditure side or vice versa, and so that's going to be an issue, and you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. When we did our complete review throughout the state of Nebraska, the number one question and issues were property tax, and I think we need to address the property tax issue. Now, as far as the state income tax is concerned, we had very little discussion about that across the state, and to be honest with you, all the research we showed shows that there's very little relationship with attracting companies here in regard to income tax. It all simply centers around property tax, and there's very little discussion about corporate tax. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place, and whatever is being done and is going to be recommended has to come through that revenue committee, and the revenue committee is actually the committee that did this study. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a showdown of what will happen.
Yeah. What about on Social Security taxes and pension? Because really, this state is not very friendly to retirees. Anything you think happen in that area?
I hope that there is. We had a lot of discussion in regard to Social Security. We had discussion in regard to military retirement and then just retirement taxes. And what's really kind of an interesting thing, there's a lot of individuals who say, well, you know, the elderly or people who get their retirement taxed leave their states, and what the studies show and the research show, that's really not true. What the people who leave the state are people who are in the military, and when you tax the military folks, they're used to just packing up and moving, and they will move out. And the research is very clear about that. And I think that has a negative impact, you know, with Offutt, you know, airfield, air base. They've got a lot of military people out there, and so I think that's something we probably need to look at and address. But I don't know if they're going to do a comprehensive change. I think they'll just hopefully over the next 4 or 5 years, they'll be changing that in a slow process and studying it, because too quick of a movement can have a real impact. Kansas is a great example of that. They made some major changes and didn't balance it out on the revenue side versus expenditure, and they're in serious hurt right now. So they're trying to go on and correct that. Nebraska doesn't want to make that same mistake.
All right. Arming teachers, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm not in favor of that. And there were some studies done by NSEA, NEA, Nebraska National Education Association, who indicated that one of the surveys they did of about 600 teachers, the majority of the teachers said they didn't want to have kids. I think if we're going to do that, we probably ought to look at another source of security, another way to protect our children. But I think anytime you start carrying guns in, you know how a teacher, I don't know how I would react. You know, having a gun in my hand and somebody coming in and making a judgment. I mean, even when you talk with law enforcement people who are trained in this area, they say, you know, there's a lot of stress that goes on you immediately, and you have to be able to think through this process, and you have to have the experience. I don't think that's a good thing for us.
All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll talk more right after this.
Generation of virtual meetings
Okay.
is arriving at the
Death penalty, you want to talk about Medicaid expansion, water.
at one time and have
do
less
that.
travel expense. With the Polycom video system, you work visually in HD, allowing a rich learning
Oh yeah, I've
experience.
had a great
We're
Christmas.
offering
My
a
wife's
featured
sick
and great
though,
sound
really
system. Your speaker
not
can be
feeling good,
off-site
so
and have human interaction.
my life will be a lot better when she's feeling better, believe me. Yeah, trying to stay away from her because I just got over. I don't think I gave her my cold. All right, we're back on News Extra. Again, we have Senator John Harms with us today to preview the legislative session. Death penalty is going to come up again, and I know there's more senators that are looking at that and siding with what Senator Chambers has said in regards to the death penalty. What's your feeling on that?
Nationally, there's been a slow movement of people moving from being in favor of the death penalty to being against the death penalty. In Nebraska, the last study that was done was about 4 or 5 years ago, showed 73% of the people in Nebraska still supported the death penalty. I think in order for us to get a better handle on that, hopefully there's a study being done that will show us how the Nebraskans now feel about the death penalty. The issue on the death penalty is going to be twofold. One, there'll be a movement, I'm sure, by Senator Chambers, who would like to just eliminate the death penalty. The other one is going to deal with the legal injection protocol and the drug. And in order for us to deal with that, the governor is the only one who can put that on the table and review that. I know there's a number of defense attorneys that say we really need to first address that issue. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I will tell you there is a movement and a change a little bit in the attitudes of people across the nation about the death penalty. And I just don't know where Nebraska is. I still support the death penalty because there's such crimes that have been so heinous that I don't know what other choice you might have. It's a terrible thing to say, but there just is. In our own community, we've had a couple of terrible things that have occurred. It just kind of sticks into my heart, and so I've always been really concerned about changing that out. And I think if you could change the protocol and address the issue, it might be better. But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what the public says.
All right, Medicaid expansion. What's your feeling on that?
Well, last year that was introduced in LB 577, which was co-sponsored by Senator Norquist and was introduced by Senator Campbell. There was no real consensus of opinion. There was so much division over that. I've never seen our floor so divided up. It got to a certain point where our speakers, Senator Adams, simply said, we're going to sidebar this bill. And when he says that, it means it's dead. And unless you guys can find all these different pockets of an agreement, we're not going to go any further with this thing. So I do know that they have worked this summer, and they will introduce another bill to address this issue. Here's where the rub comes for me. First of all, there's 58,000 people in Nebraska who do not have health insurance. Do I think they should have health insurance? Yes. Do I think this is the right process to use? No, I'm not sure about that part of it. My biggest concern is that our federal government is so dysfunctional, and it hurts me to say that, but to me that's the way it looks. And they can't reach an agreement hardly on anything. My biggest concern about expansion of Medicaid, is it going to be sustainable for Nebraska, and will the federal government keep its agreement with the state? And I just don't know if they will or not. And here's how this thing works. The federal government will pay 100% of the insurance costs for the new recipients who go into this. So in other words, those 58,000 people, they all come in. The feds will pick up all that cost, 100%. 3 years later, they'll pick up 10%. They'll pick up 90%, and we have to cover 10%. My biggest fear is that in about 5 or 6 years into this, they're going to turn to each state and say, you need to pick up greater cost of this. We've got history that shows that they've done that. They've done that with Medicare and Medicaid. They have done that with special education, which has forced us to change over and pick up more of the cost. I don't know if it's really sustainable for Nebraska. And if we went that direction and the feds decided to make those kind of changes later on, you only have several choices. You're either raise taxes or you're going to cut services in order to balance it out. So I don't know where we'll be with that. And right now I'm just kind of leaning away from it.
All right, real quick, water. Do we need to spend more money on water?
Yes, we do. Water is a big issue for us, and I know that Senator Carlson was instrumental in passing a commission and got it approved by the legislature to study it. We have no comprehensive study on water, and I would say to all of our people who are in agriculture in farming and ranching, pay a lot of attention to this, because when they start this study, you want to make sure that you have the right representation on it and that your voice is heard, because it's our livelihood.
All right, very good. All right, maybe we'll talk a little more even after we get off air here, but I appreciate you coming in this morning, being on this show. All right, back to you, Dan.